So apparently we have discovered who Jack the Ripper was with DNA evidence. Again! Wow!
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
But today I'll be sharing with you a story that the sensationalist tabloids won't share. A tale of fabricated evidence, rampant anti-Semitism, and news outlets that are so hungry for clicks that they just refuse to fact check. Welcome to History of London, where I chat to you guys about gruesome murders and salacious gossip from the past. Of course, my first video had to be about Jack the Ripper and that bloody shawl. So before we dive in, please subscribe to my channel and feel free to follow my TikTok and my Instagram, which will be linked below, for more historical myth busting. I have also just launched my new merch line. So if you identify as a hot historian, maybe check it out, because there is nothing sexier than a history nerd. So who was Jack the Ripper? In 1888, at least 5 women were found dead in the Whitechapel district of London, an area that was renowned for its filth, prostitution, petty crime, pubs, it's got some good pubs, and murder. His victims were prostitutes, whether by profession or on a more casual basis. Unfortunately, the 5, I'm a big fan of the book, but has really pushed this narrative that Jack the Ripper's victims weren't prostitutes just because 3 of them were opportunists who only dabbled in the trade. But I think it's really important to point out that this line of work actually left them extremely vulnerable, and that's probably what made Jack the Ripper target them. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes and Mary Jane Kelly were all murdered brutally, with methods that targeted their reproductive organs, involved extensive mutilation, and was indicative of a perpetrator who absolutely despised, I'm talking loathed, women. Probably feared them, and most likely had some problems in the trouser snake department, like a little bit of performance, issue. The man was frustrated. I think he got his kicks out of doing this. It's quite sick. So much so that he actually attempted to behead Annie Chapman, and as for poor Mary Jane Kelly, who was the only victim to meet her demise indoors, he disfigured her face beyond recognition and threw her organs around the room. It's a case that has driven the world to obsession for almost 150 years. So much so that some seriously outlandish theories have emerged regarding the identity of Jack the Ripper, like that it was a woman, which to me feels lazy and misogynistic, because from a forensic psychology standpoint, this is an inherently male crime targeting prostitutes and sort of the method of which he attacked them. It's just not, we don't do that. We poison our husbands and old people to get an inheritance. We don't slash women selling sex in the street to death. So now that we've nipped that in the bud, we're gonna move on. So I don't want to hit any Jill the Ripper theorists in my comments. Thank you. Speaking of which, people have gone to some seriously quite sad lengths to attempt to acquire the eternal fame that comes with being the person who caught Jack the Ripper, from fabricating diaries, sort of listing a confession, to tearing up paintings in the hopes of linking the artist to these crime scenes. But this might be the most ridiculous attempt yet. In 2007, a man named Russell Edwards claimed to have bought a shawl at auction, and he alleged that this shawl was found at the crime scene of Catherine Eddowes' murder. Now, Catherine Eddowes was the only victim to be found on City of London police ground, whereas all the other victims were found on Metropolitan Police ground. Her body was discovered by City of London police officer Edward Watkins, and the City of London police made extensive, rigorous records of what was found on and around her remains. Surprise, surprise, no shawl. Not a dicky bird relating to this shawl of deceit. Now, here is where this glorified rag's provenance comes into real dispute. It was supposedly picked up by Metropolitan Police Officer Amos Simpson, of whom there is no record of him ever being there. And you know, if he was sort of wandering around the crime scene, he would have been arrested by the City of London Police, because that is a officer from a different force wandering around on their beat. So he would be treated as a suspect. The only way for Amos Simpson to have picked up this shawl before, anyone attended the scene was if he had killed Catherine Eddowes and possibly the other 4 women too. But something tells me that his surviving family wouldn't like me proposing this concept. So we'll keep this just between us, yeah? Yeah, don't snitch on me. Or do. I don't give a tinker's toss, frankly. Now, the shawl is 8 to 9 feet long, and it's made from Russian silk. And this has led to critics suggesting that it is not actually a shawl, but a tablecloth. And there's a real problem with this, suggestion that it belonged to Catherine Eddowes, because the day before she was murdered, she went off and pawned a pair of boots. This poor woman was absolutely destitute, and this, fantastically opulent piece of fabric would have earned her a pretty penny. So why would she keep hold of it? It just doesn't sit right with me. In fact, I am getting the distinct whiff of horse droppings. Fast forward to 2014, and praise be, Russell Edwards has solved the case with DNA evidence. But he refuses to release any information surrounding how this was done. So his readers can't assess the scientific method that was used. He pins the murder on 23-year-old Polish Jew Aaron Kosminski. Kosminski, being an unhinged misogynist, isn't the most unlikely suspect in my opinion, but the police have a name for fitting someone up, and it is known as malicious prosecution. Then in 2019, the scientific team behind all this, fabulous stuff, finally released their research in the Journal of Forensic Sciences. But this is problematic because it wasn't peer reviewed. And then a lot of scientists call them out for their sloppy methodology and the fact that they didn't actually publish the data, just a series of sort of vague graphs. The alleged 100% DNA match for Kosminski and Eddowes isn't actually 100% at all. They used mitochondrial DNA, which can't be used to identify a suspect. It can only be used to rule a suspect out because it actually matches thousands of people. So, this research could incriminate one of my ancestors or one of yours. But does that mean that they were Jack the Ripper? No. Particularly since, it was these samples were taken from semen on the shawl, and Jack the Ripper famously did not have intercourse with his victims. Hence, you know, the concept that he had downstairs trouble and he was, you know, acting out, to put it politely, in frustration. He probably blamed women for his little John Thomas issues, actually. Or maybe he had syphilis, you know, maybe his nose was falling off. Now, many people have described Russell Edwards as a con man and a fraud. Moving swiftly on, in 2022, he orchestrated what many described on ye old internet as a quite repugnant publicity stunt. You may have heard of the Moors murders, which involved the notoriously evil, sick, twisted, warped, you name it, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley brutally murdering and essaying 5 children in and around Manchester. 4 of these children were buried on the moors, and while 3 of them were discovered, Keith Bennett very sadly remains lost and not yet reunited with his surviving family. Now, Edwards took it upon himself to claim that he had found Keith Bennett's skull, and instead of contacting the police or Keith's family first, he got in touch with the press. And I remember seeing an interview with him on the news that just incensed me. He was being asked by the presenter about, you know, where he found Keith, you know, the details of this discovery, and he just kept diverting and finding all kinds of ways to, like, plug his Jack the Ripper book and, you know, proclaim himself as, well, you know, as the man who solved the Jack the Ripper case and identified Jack the Ripper. We're not talking about that now. What are you doing? This is a dead child we're talking about. It's not the time or the place. His story also kept changing. First, he said that he found an entire skull, and then it was just a fraction of a skull. He said his team had taken it away for testing, and then he said, oh no, actually we just left it where it was for the police to deal with. Then he took to Facebook to announce that Keith's body had been found when it hadn't. The police were still searching the area. And when the police announced that no human remains or clothing or any evidence was discovered in this area of Saddleworth Moor, it was revealed that 2 of his team weren't actually qualified or accredited experts in their field. One, Dawn Keane, and one, Leslie Dunlop. Keith Bennett's brother spoke out on Facebook quite extensively, basically calling Russell Edwards a grifter and pointing out how much of a detrimental, heartbreaking effect this had had on him and the rest of the surviving family. Because, you know, exploiting a murdered child for book sales, I'm not saying he did that, but, you know, just throwing it out there, if someone were to do that, that would be a really evil thing to do. After 3 years of radio silence in the year of our Lord, 2025, Mr. Edwards goes back to the press with the same old chestnut that had been debunked in 2019, claiming that he had solved the Jack the Ripper case and identified Jack the Ripper as Polish Jew Aaron Kosminski using DNA evidence. And you guys bought it. All thanks to the press and TikTokers who were so desperate to generate likes and views and remain relevant that they did absolutely no background checking into the story at all. And, you know, they uploaded bits around the shawl of deceit in the hopes of, you know, producing a little bit of clickbait. And then we had neo-Nazis spawning in the comment section of every single post about this because, you know, Jack the Ripper had been identified as a Jewish immigrant. So you can imagine the sorts of things they were saying, and I found it really frustrating because I picked up on a real lack of responsibility on the part of Russell Edwards and the press for, you know, really pushing this narrative without any real evidence to back it up. Fortunately, however, the tide seemed to turn when I posted this viral video.
Oh my god, we've identified Jack the Ripper. No, we fucking haven't.
Debunking the shawl of deceit for what it was. Until now. Over the last few weeks, I have received a flurry of comments and tags, all of them claiming that, no, actually, that DNA is legit. Like, nothing has changed about the situation. It's the same as it was earlier in the year. And can someone tell me why people are saying that if DNA from a dinosaur can last, you know, hundreds of thousands of years, so can forensic DNA from Jack the Ripper? Shut it.
Yappa, 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 yappa. Shut it, please.
Forensic analysis doesn't work that way, unfortunately, and I'm here to set the record straight and hopefully provide you guys with the tools to tackle this dangerous misinformation online. So, will we ever truly know who Jack the Ripper was? Unless we invent time travel, absolutely not. There is no miracle DNA or confession via Ouija board that can positively identify the killer or killers who murdered those women in London in 1888. Anyone who claims to be the person who definitively solved the case is, in my opinion, a money-hungry charlatan who is desperate for the fame that comes with being the person who identified Jack the Ripper. These were at least 5 vulnerable women who were murdered in the most brutal, violent way possible, and I think that we as a society have become extremely desensitized to it. This isn't a game of guess who. This is a complete miscarriage of justice. And all I can think about is how terrified these women must have been in their final moments.